You walk away from a conversation feeling like you've been wrung out like a sponge. Emptiness. Your hands tremble. Your gaze unfocused. Your heart pounds as if you've just escaped danger, but no one was chasing you. No one was screaming. You were just standing by the window with a cup of cold coffee, listening. Does this sound familiar? Here's the paradox. The most draining people aren't those who yell or openly manipulate. They're the ones who just talk, who just share, who just need. And you, like a sponge, absorb their anxiety, their fear, their perpetual crisis, without a single no. Your brain doesn't distinguish between someone else's stress and your own. Your mirror neurons, those invisible witnesses to others' emotions, activate instantly. They don't ask for permission. They simply mirror. And your body reacts as if you yourself were caught in the epicenter of someone else's storm. Cortisol levels soar. Oxytocin drops. Energy drains away. You're not weak. You're just unprotected. Imagine your colleague Mark calls again. His voice is even, almost calm. But in his eyes, emptiness. He talks about his life as if it's a horror movie where he's the main victim. You listen. You nod. You promise support. And 10 minutes later, you can't remember why you even picked up that cup of coffee. Your body is already in a state of alarm, shoulders tense, breathing shallow, mouth dry. This isn't just tiredness. It's a biochemical reaction to emotional leakage. Dr. Alison Rowe's research shows that the brains of empaths activate in the same way as someone who is actually experiencing stress. You are literally living someone else's pain, neuron by neuron. And yes, it's exhausting, but you don't have to be a sponge. In the next few minutes, you'll learn how to recognize 4 types of energy vampires, not by their words, but by their patterns. How your body sends signals long before your mind realizes something is wrong. And most importantly, how to build a shield that doesn't shut down your empathy but protects it. Because being kind doesn't mean being defenseless. Look here. Your body already knows the truth. It's time to listen to it. Sarah first felt it after one of Mark's calls. She was sitting at the table. Her cup of tea had already gone cold. A heaviness in her chest, as if a stone lay directly on her heart. Her head swam. Her temples throbbed. Her hands trembled. Not from anger, not from fear, from exhaustion. As if every cell had given out. Have you felt this? Mark didn't yell, didn't demand. He just said, "You're the only one who understands me." And she said, "Yes," again. But her body already knew the truth. It was screaming. Her mind was silent. This isn't imagination. It's physiology. When someone nearby is breathing anxiety, your body switches to survival mode. Cortisol rises. Oxytocin falls. Your heart speeds up. Your breathing constricts. Your muscles tense. Your pupils dilate. You're not just tired. You've experienced a micro-trauma. And if such encounters repeat, your nervous system gets stuck in a state of anxiety, even when it's quiet around you. Clinical data doesn't lie. These individuals experience a drop in immunity. Sleep is disrupted. Thoughts become muddled. All of this happens many months before a burnout diagnosis. Here's what's shocking. After just 15 minutes of conversation with someone who turns a minor issue into an apocalypse, Your cortisol levels jump by 32%. Oxytocin drops by 27%. Your body doesn't differentiate between a real threat and an emotional one. It reacts the same way. And each such call leaves a mark, like a scratch on your nervous system. 1 is imperceptible. 10 turn you into fragile glass. Laboratories confirm emotional vampirism is not a metaphor. It's measurable stress, comparable to short-term post-traumatic shock. Your body knows the truth before you do. It sends signals, palms sweat, shoulders cramp, a lump in your throat. But you ignore it because he's not mean, because he's suffering. But it's not about malice. It's about patterns. 4 recurring behavioral models that act like pumps. They don't scream. They quietly drain. And you don't even notice yourself becoming an empty shell. Imagine you leave a cafe. After a conversation with a stranger, you feel light. But after a call from a loved one, you feel wrung out. Why? Because some people give energy, others take, without asking, without returning. And now you'll learn how to recognize them, not by their words, by your body. Because your body is the first lie detector. Mark is a manipulator. He doesn't ask. He hints. You always know how to help me, and you activate your rescuer mode again. Linda is a victim. Her voice is quiet, but her stories are heavy, like a wet blanket. You leave her feeling like you should have done more. Amy is a dramatist. Her house is always on fire. Always. But the fire is strange. It never goes out and never really blazes. It just is. To keep you from leaving. Uncle Robert is a seeker. His eyes light up with a new idea every week. He doesn't want advice. He wants your approval, like fuel. They aren't malicious. They are hungry. Hungry for release. And you are their outlet. The manipulator triggers guilt like a switch. The victim creates an illusion of urgency. If not you, then who? The dramatist keeps you in suspense, like a TV series without an ending. The seeker demands energy on faith. Believe, and everything will work out. But faith is not an infinite resource. It flows, and you are the one who flows. Emptiness. But there's a 5th type, and he doesn't shout. He's silent. This is the person who doesn't respond to your emotions, doesn't acknowledge, doesn't reject, simply disappears. In conversation, in presence, in their eyes. And you start doing everything yourself. You guess. You re-ask. You apologize for things that didn't happen. Your brain switches to signal-seeking mode amidst the noise, and it works itself to exhaustion. This isn't coldness. It's a trap. Passive vampirism. He doesn't drain. He makes you pour into emptiness. Again and again. Research shows such conversations activate the amygdala more strongly than open conflict. Because the brain cannot tolerate uncertainty, it prefers pain to clarity. Does this feeling sound familiar? When you leave a meeting and think, I didn't say anything. Why am I so tired? That's him. The 5th. The invisible one. But you don't have to fill that void. Your empathy isn't a reservoir for someone else's chaos. It's a compass, not fuel. And yes, you feel their pain because your mirror neurons are like open doors. They don't ask, yours or someone else's. They just let it in. Especially if you're one of the 15% whose neurons glow brighter than others. You're not broken. You just didn't know. Behind kindness can hide a pump, and behind silence, a vacuum. Now you know their faces. But why can't you say no anyway? Because your brain confuses to save and to connect. And that's the next trap. Sarah remembered the moment she first felt herself losing herself. Mark was talking about how his boss was ruining his life. And suddenly, she felt his anxiety in her chest, like physical pressure. His fear in her hands, which became icy. His despair in her head where her thoughts began to muddle. She wasn't just empathizing. She literally absorbed his state. And the longer the conversation lasted, the less of herself remained, as if her inner light dimmed to illuminate his darkness. She couldn't understand. Where did he end and she begin? This question tormented her at night, because she was afraid. What if she had already disappeared? Meanwhile, in her brain, mirror neurons synchronized with his emotional state and began to expend her own cognitive resources on regulating someone else's chaos. This isn't poetry. It's neurobiology. Mirror neurons, your invisible witnesses to others' emotions. They live in the premotor cortex and the inferior parietal lobule, and they don't ask permission. When you see someone else's fear, your brain activates the same scenario as if you yourself were running from danger. In highly empathetic people, these neurons glow brighter. The boundary between mine and theirs blurs. Your brain tries to regulate two emotional systems simultaneously, its own and someone else's. And this is an overload. fMRI scans show that after just 20 minutes of conversation with an anxious person, activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, the center of emotional control, decreases. You lose connection with yourself. Here's a number that changes everything. People with high levels of empathy, about 15% of the population, lose up to 40% of their cognitive energy in just 30 minutes of interacting with a chronically negative conversational partner. This isn't a bad mood. It's a real depletion of brain resources. You can't concentrate. You can't decide what to order at a cafe. You can't remember where you put your keys. You're not weak. You have system overload. Empathy isn't a gift. It's a burden. And it requires protection. Without it, you don't just get tired. You lose access to your own self. Imagine, your brain is like a restaurant with a finite menu of energy. Every time you immerse yourself in someone else's pain, you order a dish at someone else's expense. But you pay. And one day, the menu runs out. You look at your reflection and don't recognize yourself. This isn't your fault. It's physiology. And now you'll learn how to build a shield, not of lies, but of boundaries. Because empathy without protection is like a heart without skin. But more on that later. First, admit it. You're not broken. You were just operating in double duty mode. And that's enough. In the school staff room, Sarah noticed, as soon as Mark entered, the whole room felt heavier. Conversation stopped short. People lowered their eyes, breathed shallower, moved as if through water. Even those who hadn't spoken a word to him by the end of the day looked as if they had run a marathon, shoulders hunched, voices quieter, smiles rarer. Have you felt this? When one person walks into a room and the air changes, not because he's shouting, not because he's angry, it's just his anxiety, like a virus, seeping into every breath, every nervous sigh, every slumped shoulder. The whole room becomes infected. This is not a metaphor. This is emotional contagion. Your brain catches micro-expressions, tone of voice, breathing rhythm, and instantly synchronizes your state with another's. You don't choose. You just catch it. Like the flu. The insular cortex, your internal discomfort detector, activates after just 10 minutes of being with an anxious person. Even if you're silent, even if you're looking out the window, your body is already under stress. And this is where it gets interesting. One draining person reduces the productivity of an entire team by 22%. Not because they interfere, but because they poison the emotional atmosphere. Their anxiety is like background noise that hinders thought, slows decisions, kills creativity. In experiments, one passively anxious person in a group, and errors among others increase by 18%. Decision-making time doubles. You think you're safe because you don't interact. But you're not safe. You're breathing the same air. Imagine. You're sitting in a meeting. Mark is silent, but his tension is in every gesture. And by the end of the meeting, you can't remember what was discussed. Your hands are clammy. Your heart is pounding. You feel drained, but you don't understand why. Does this feeling sound familiar? You are not alone. 74% of Americans continue to interact with draining people, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being called selfish. Fear of breaking the myth. A good person always helps. But kindness is not self-destruction. Empathy is not an obligation to survive for two. Now look at your palms. Are they damp? Are your shoulders tense? Is your breathing shallow? This is no coincidence. This is a signal. Your body already knows you are in an infected zone. And now the question, what will you do with this truth? Sarah sat at the kitchen table clutching a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, the porcelain surface radiating only a dull, dead coolness. On her phone screen, a new message from Mark. I urgently need help with the report. You know I'm in a crisis right now. She knew. She always knew. And every time she said yes. But today, something inside her resisted. She typed, "Sorry, I can't today." Her fingers trembled, as if each pressed character required an effort comparable to lifting a heavy weight. Her heart pounded in her chest at a rate of 110 beats per minute, as wearable sensors would have recorded, as if she had committed an act of betrayal. The thought swirled in her head. What if he thinks I'm selfish? That I'm abandoning him in his time of need? She erased the message, rewrote it. Of course I'll help. And immediately felt a heaviness in her chest. Not relief, but a deep, draining fatigue, accompanied by a metallic taste of anxiety in her mouth. Because refusing was scarier than burning out. The fear of judgment activated the same neural network as physical pain. This isn't weakness. It's a trap. Why can't you say no? Even when your body screams enough. Because since childhood you've been hammered with a good person is always available, always ready, always sacrifices. 74% of Americans believe if you don't give of yourself, you're selfish. But that's not true. It's programming. and your brain interprets refusal as a threat to survival. The anterior cingulate cortex, the area responsible for pain, lights up when you even think about boundaries. Your jaws clench. Your throat goes dry. Your shoulders are like concrete. You're not afraid of the person. You're afraid they'll stop loving you. And that's more painful than a blow. This isn't weakness. It's a trap. Does this feeling sound familiar? You're not alone. 74% of people suffering from burnout continue to feed energy vampires, not out of kindness, but out of fear. Fear of being called cold. Fear of being excluded from the circle of good people. This isn't a personal failure. It's a cultural myth disguised as virtue. And it's killing you. Slowly. Drop by drop. Laboratories record such individuals have chronically elevated cortisol, and their prefrontal cortex is weakened. You're not too sensitive. You're a hostage of a system where kindness is confused with self-destruction. This isn't weakness, it's a trap. But what if saying no isn't betrayal, but an act of survival? What if your boundaries aren't a wall, but a shield behind which you preserve the ability to be yourself? Because without protection, you won't be able to help, or love, or even breathe deeply. And here's the good news. The brain can rewire itself. Dr. Alison Rowe's study involving 1,200 people showed, after just 72 hours of the first clear refusal, 61% of participants experienced reduced anxiety and restored clarity of thought. This isn't magic. It's neuroplasticity. Your brain learns, I have the right to be whole. Look at your hands. Do they tremble at the thought of refusal? Remember, trembling isn't weakness. It's your body freeing itself from lies. And yes, you can say no. Not for your sake, but to remain yourself. Sarah said no for the first time and didn't die. Mark wrote, "You won't refuse, will you?" She replied, "Today I have a boundary. I can't take on someone else's tasks. Good luck." Her heart, 120 beats per minute. Her palms, sweaty. A ringing in her ears. But an hour later, silence. Mark didn't disappear. The world didn't collapse. And in her chest, warmth, like sunlight after a long winter. Have you felt this? This isn't luck. It's a technique. Time boundaries. You set a limit. 10 minutes. No more. And not about crises. Grey rock. You become a neutral echo. Understood. Good luck. Without emotions. Without details. Without fuel for his anxiety. Manipulators starve without your reaction. Their neuronal reward circuits dim. And in extreme cases, a complete break. This isn't cruelty. It's a medical necessity. The National Institute of Mental Health confirms. Contact with a chronic energy vampire slows your recovery by half and increases the risk of depression by 45%. But the most striking thing is, you don't just feel better. Your body heals. After 2 days of clear boundaries, cortisol drops by 41%. Oxytocin rises. fMRI scans show the amygdala, the fear center, calms down. The prefrontal cortex regains control. You return to yourself. Imagine you say no, and after 48 hours your hands stop trembling. Your breathing is deeper. Your gaze is sharper. This isn't a metaphor, it's biochemistry. Does this feeling sound familiar? When you protect yourself, and for the first time in months, you feel alive, this isn't abandoning kindness, it's renewing it. Because only a whole person can offer a hand to another, not the remnants of themselves. But why then does guilt still clench your throat? Because you were taught to be kind means to dissolve. To be strong means to be silent. Dr. Rowe calls this a cultural trap. And science offers a way out. True strength is in choice. True kindness is in resilience. Look at your palms. Are they dry? Then you're already on your way. You are not a sponge. You are a person. And you have the right to be whole. Sarah looked at her reflection in the mirror and thought, a real teacher must always be available. A real friend must always be supportive. A real daughter must take care of her parents. These phrases echoed in her head like a mantra, burned into her consciousness by years of cultural pressure. And every time she tried to rest, guilt rose like a tide, cold, relentless, clenching her throat. Because in her world, in the American world, being good meant being endlessly available, and saying I need time for myself sounded almost like an admission of selfishness. But one day she realized, if she didn't stop, there would simply be nothing left of her. Not figuratively. Her body was already sending signals, insomnia, hand tremors, constant fatigue, classic markers of emotional exhaustion recorded in 68% of Americans. American culture is built on a paradox. The strong one is silent. The kind one gives everything. You're taught to be independent, but punished for not helping, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a teacher, especially if you're the one who's always there. And when you fall, the world doesn't ask, who burdened you so much? It whispers, you failed. Gallup confirms 71% of professionals in caring professions hide burnout, not because they don't suffer, but because they're afraid of being labeled weak. Here's a number that cuts to the truth. 68% of Americans regularly feel drained, but they stay silent. They're ashamed. Because in a culture where kindness is a duty, admitting I'm hurting because of a loved one is tantamount to admitting I'm bad. But that's not true. It's a lie disguised as virtue. Laboratories record in such individuals cortisol rises by 32%. Oxytocin drops by 27%. Not from weakness, from a real biochemical blow. You are not broken. The system is broken. And realizing this is liberation. Because when you understand, the problem isn't with me, but with how expectations are structured, you stop blaming yourself. You start protecting yourself, not out of selfishness, out of love. True intimacy is built not on self-sacrifice, but on wholeness. As Dr. Rowe says, boundaries are not a wall. They are a foundation. Look at your hands. Do they tremble at the thought, what if I'm a bad person? Remember, trembling is not fear. It's your wholeness breaking through the myth. You don't have to burn yourself out to warm others. You have the right to be whole. Sarah no longer waits for Mark's call with bated breath. She breathes. Deeply, evenly, without a lump in her throat. Have you felt this? Here's the whole picture. Your body isn't background. It's the first witness. Cortisol spikes. Your heart pounds as if you're running. Sleep shatters into fragments. Your brain isn't an observer. It's a participant. Mirror neurons, those invisible witnesses to others' emotions, absorb others' anxiety like a sponge absorbs water. Dr. Rowe's fMRI scans show, in highly empathetic people, the insular cortex, responsible for internal discomfort, becomes overloaded after just 30 minutes next to chronic negativity. Your behavior isn't weakness. It's a consequence. You encounter one of 4 patterns. The manipulator triggers guilt. The victim creates urgency. The dramatist keeps you in suspense. The seeker demands approval. And culture isn't neutral. It whispers, a good person doesn't say no. Especially if you're a woman. Especially if you're a teacher. Especially if you're the one who's always there. But when you connect everything, body, brain, behavior, culture, you see, the problem isn't you. The problem is the absence of a shield. And a shield isn't a wall. It's a boundary. Scientifically constructed, consciously set, without guilt. Sarah didn't become cold. She became whole. After 6 in the evening, her phone is on silent. At work, that's not my task. With Mark, polite, good luck. And instead of exhaustion, energy. Energy to teach children without burning herself out. Energy to laugh with friends without feeling guilty. Energy to simply live. Her subjective happiness level increased by 58% in 6 months. She didn't change. She reclaimed her right to be herself. And here's the final truth. Boundaries aren't selfishness. They are love. Love for yourself, because you're saying, I have value. Love for others, because you don't allow them to destroy you. You don't let them become destroyers. You're saying, I love you, but not at the cost of my life. In this, there is no coldness. In this, there is maturity. Longitudinal studies by Pew Research confirm people with clear boundaries build deeper, more stable relationships, because their care flows from abundance, not from obligation. And now, to you. Have you ever given everything and in return heard, where's the rest? Have you felt your kindness turn into a debt? If so, you're not alone. Write in the comments one word yes or no, if you're lucky. This isn't a survey. It's an acknowledgement. An acknowledgement that you have a right to space, to silence, to yourself. Because saying no is sometimes the most human act. Only when you are whole can you give the world what you have. Not remnants, but light. Boundaries are love. True. Alive. Yours.